welcome back. This is the South African Morning. Now, ever wondered what your furry friend is thinking? Well, this morning we're learning to speak dog, and it seems it's all about the tail. Body language and a wagging tail is how dogs convey and communicate, or even convey emotions, from being nervous to feeling threatened and wanting to attack. So to teach us more about this, we're now joined by Michelle Moll, Beeno's animal behaviourist, joining us this morning for more on this. And Michelle, thank you so much for your time and good morning to you. Quite an interesting one, especially for those who don't necessarily own dogs or pets, that when it comes to wagging one's tail, that could be a way for a dog to show emotions.
That's correct. Unfortunately, most people tend to believe the fallacy that a dog's tail wagging indicates the dog is very happy. That's not actually so. A lot depends on the breed of the dog, a lot depends on how the tail wags, and a lot depends on what is actually happening at that moment in time to cause the dog to wag its tail. We call them vivid signals, and a lot of breeds indicate happiness by wagging the tail, and a lot of breeds that got a strong prey drive will wag their tail when they are highly aroused and reactive, which could mean that they're being actually aggressive.
Yeah. So as a dog owner or a pet owner, particularly a dog owner, how then do you know what emotion the dog is trying to convey when it wags its tail?
The whole thing is you've got to put it into context, and you've got to really know your dog. You've got to know quite a bit about the breed or the crossbreed before you, well, when you get it, when you actually obtain the animal or where you obtain the animal from. And for example, if you take let's just take hypothetically a terrier. A terrier is a breed that is bred to hunt things out of the ground, hence the word terror from the earth. And if they are about to, if they scent prey and they're digging for it, or they're about to grab something, their tail wags like a metronome, hectically. And that isn't quite the same joy as you're getting with a golden retriever when you're taking it for a walk or you're giving it a treat. The golden retriever will wag its tail from side to side in a slowish motion, whereas a terrier that is about to see something, the tail goes like a little metronome.
Right.
And if you're going to put your hands in there at that moment in time, well, you will expect to get bitten. So the thing is, it's not just the tail that we take into consideration. We take into consideration the dog's ear set, how the dog is actually holding its ears at that moment in time. And if the dog itself is relaxed, a dog that is very tense tends to set its jaw, narrow its eyes, and the pupils will sometimes dilate. It can lick its lips. It can yawn. Those are all stress signals. So the tail might be wagging, but if the dog is doing this yawn, it's quite a yawn. They're trying to release tension. And if they lick their lips like this, well, the dog is getting pretty tense. If you see the eyes are narrowing and the dog is tensing up, get away from the dog, irrespective of the fact whether the dog is wagging its tail or not.
Yeah.
And I see this with people who believe that because they own the dog, they are allowed to take food away from the dog. They are allowed to stand over it when it eats. And that can make the dog nervous. And if we keep on pushing it and the dog is trying to appease you, it's wagging its tail, but we insist, that is when we get the snap and something happens, unfortunately.
Yeah. Michelle, how important is it to have this information, to understand when a dog is trying to communicate with you? Because I'm thinking this is information that I wonder if many pet owners know. Like you're saying, sometimes as an owner you feel entitled to a certain behavior towards a dog, not necessarily listening to what their response is.
I agree with you. You know, how everything would be resolved in the ideal world is that people would do research before they got their animals, and they would take their animals to dog training classes. We know that it doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, finances don't dictate that people can't do that necessarily. People quite often get an animal for the wrong purpose, and quite often in the behavioral practices we get this, well, I wanted a dog or a cat for my child. The child isn't old enough, isn't mature enough to actually take possession of an animal and work with an animal. You'd have to introduce them both to each other and teach the child how to behave around the animal. The fallacy of going up to a dog and just petting it on its head. If I had to walk up to you and you'd never met me before in my life, and I shoved my face into yours and I grabbed your hand, you would be quite distressed. You wouldn't know how to cope with it. So we've got to bear that in mind. They've also got their safe spaces. The breeds react differently to different things. And in this day and age, a lot of people are getting dogs for guarding purposes, not understanding what they've actually got. And when the dog becomes terribly reactive and somebody gets injured badly, quite often it's the fault of the people who took that animal on because their expectations were incorrect and they hadn't provided the correct training and educated themselves enough.
Absolutely, and training goes both ways. It's not just for the dog to be trained, but also as an owner to understand, the language of the dog. I want to know more about the Beeno Wegometer, which we can find, I think, in stores as well. Please tell me more about that. I'm hoping I'm also pronouncing it correctly. The Beeno Wegometer,
Yeah.
if that's the correct pronunciation.
Wegometer,
yes.
Yeah. It's basically what it is. It's about recognizing your animal and acknowledging your animal and increasing the interaction between you and your animal in a positive way, which is taking it for a walk, rewarding it, interacting with it. It's a positive thing for animals, and I think the more people that will be aware of it and look at this and try and work within the parameters of this Wegometer, we're going to have a lot more happy relationships between, I don't like using the word owners because owner denotes that you can do anything you want to, it's merely property, but the guardians of these animals, particularly these dogs. In the wake of what's happening in our country right now with dogs, the more that we have a resource like that and people can work with something like that, the better for everybody.